This UK government doesn't recognise the new reality of the internal politics of the United Kingdom, which means that we're one state but four nations, and she has to govern, Theresa May has to govern as the Prime Minister of four nations, not just one nation.
I mean, you can't set up devolved administrations and give them lots of additional powers and and so forth, if you're not prepared to listen to what they have to say about something that is absolutely fundamental to everyone's lives. So I think, what we learn about power in this case is it still rests with the UK, but it's not quite as simple these days to just push through a whole UK approach or solution to this, as it would have been, 40 years ago when we had the previous EU referendum.
I think in Scotland, the politicians feel, mostly quite rightly, that they don't have much voice or influence in this, and that the coordination mechanisms and the communication forums, the Joint Ministerial Committee that's meant to coordinate relationships between England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, has not been functioning very well. It's not been meeting very often. I think then when you go on to look at the EU withdrawal bill and what the Scottish Government has called a power grab by Westminster, since the withdrawal bill aims to bring back powers from the EU to London and to Westminster first, rather than in devolved areas like environment, agriculture, fisheries, justice and home affairs, giving it all to Scotland. And then later decide only by the UK deciding without a Scottish voice or veto what further powers might be delegated or devolved on down to Scotland.
I accept that we're part of a UK single market, and clearly there have to be some ground rules. But those ground rules should be by agreement between the Westminster government and the three devolved governments. It shouldn't be a diktat from Westminster. But fundamentally, we want those powers back, not just the ones that are already covering devolved issues like agriculture and fishing. We should also get control over employment rights, environmental rights, and a whole range of other areas where we want to be much more progressive north of the border than is likely to happen south of the border. So it's an opportunity for the Scottish Parliament to get substantially enhanced powers, and I think the Tories have been rather stupid in how they've handled this and should recognise that there is widespread support for that, even amongst people who didn't vote for independence. Secondly, we need the money that goes with those powers. Now, if you look at the work done by the Scottish Parliament's Information Centre, if Scotland, the Scottish Parliament, get our share after the implementation transition period, if we get our share of the UK's contribution to Europe, we could fund every single European programme that's funded today in Scotland, including agricultural subsidies, etc., and have about £800 million a year left over.
The Scottish Government is concerned that those powers are being brought back to Westminster and are not being devolved back to, in our case, the Scottish Parliament.
So there is a standoff, but there are a lot of discussions going on about that. The UK government has at least woken up to the fact it's going to be very problematic if the Welsh and the Scottish, who are coordinating very closely on this, vote against giving their permission from their assemblies and parliaments for that bill.
What the UK government is saying is that will happen in time, but the Scottish government is saying, no, we need that to happen immediately, and frankly, we don't trust you to do the right thing. So that's the current sort of argument between the UK and the Scottish governments. In a nutshell, the Scottish government accepts Brexit is happening, but is worried about what that final deal will mean and whether the voice of the Scottish government and the different economic and political conditions in Scotland are going to be sufficiently noticed and catered for in the final deal that the UK government negotiates with the European Union.